Gill, you've just completed the writing of this book, A New Song, which is about the history of a certain stream of fellowships in the UK, which developed from the 1960s and indeed right through to the present day. What does that stream of fellowships mean to you personally?
They mean everything. I've been to a lot of different churches, different denominations, and they're all good in many ways, but there is no comparison to the life that I saw and the joy and the teaching in the fellowships. It was completely, it blew me away, and it's been very wonderful and very different. There was nothing particularly wrong with the other denominations. They all had good teaching, but the understanding that and the teaching from the fellowships was so different, and it was the answer to everything that I had questions to at the time.
Any particular emphasis from the scriptures in the nature of these fellowships?
I think if you talk to lots of people, first of all, as I have over the years, and they said, we always knew there was something more to the Christian life, but we didn't know what it was until we heard Mr. North, Norman, Dave Weatherly, and it revolutionised our lives. That particular teaching was really from, there's lots of scriptures, but Ezekiel 36 is one particular one where the Lord promises to give us a new heart, to take out the old life, take out the old stony heart, and in its place put his life, his spirit, because he wants to live his life through us. He doesn't want us to try and fail and try and fail.
And you mentioned a Norman there. Now that's Mr. Norman Meeten, who was very instrumental in the very early stages of these fellowships. What's the significance of his role?
He was a very respected curate in the Anglican Church in Liverpool. And he loved the community, he loved the church, he loved all that it was, stood for. But he really found that in himself, if he was really honest, he didn't have the answer to the tremendous needs around him. He was surrounded by poverty. He was surrounded by children with no homes, who were starving, who had never known love before. There were enormous needs, and he just had to admit in himself he didn't have the answer.
So, Gill, what is the keynote of this group of fellowships?
There's a lot of scriptures that all tie out. One in particular is Ezekiel in chapter 36. The Lord promises to take out our old stony hearts, and in that place to put in his spirit, his life, which is revolutionary. I've always been taught in the past, do this for the Lord, do that for the Lord, reach this standard, reach that standard. You can't do it. The only life that is pleasing to the Lord is his life in us. And if there's that exchange, I think Hudson Taylor talked about the exchange life. We let him have our old lives and let him come and live his life within us.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Gill. Well, John and Heather White, they have been involved in the fellowships for quite a number of years, and I understand that the annual conferences have always been a great feature from the very early days. And what does that mean to you and to the fellowships, John, please?
Yes, that was a very important part of our early days. And I just want to share really one incident that came back vividly to me, and it's recorded in the book. And we'd gone to the conference in Derby, and we were in the meeting, and there was this tremendous worship. This is one of the features of the fellowships, that the worship was incredible. And there we were in the meeting, and suddenly in the middle of it, a lady stood up near the back and said, "Excuse me, Mr. North, could we please pray for China?" And after being stunned for just a minute, he turned to Norman Meeten, who was also on the platform, and said, "Norman, you're planning to go to China. Will you pray for China, for the people?" So Norman stood up and he was trying to start to pray, and then he went on his knees and he was agonizing. So there was a distress in his heart and he couldn't really give voice to what he was trying to say. Then he fell flat on his face. Mr. North joined him in his face, and then, you know the way the wind blows through the wheat during harvest, and you can see the movement of the wind by the way the wheat is blown, and that happened in the meeting. I remember right at the front, people started falling down on their faces and crying out to God. Gradually it swept through the whole meeting, quite a large gathering, until everybody was praying and agonizing, for they didn't know what it was, but they were in agony, in prayer, just expressing what was on their hearts. And this must have gone on for 10, 15 minutes, I don't recall the exact length of time, and then gradually it faded, and I thought that was just the end of it, but 12 hours or so later, it was announced on the news that the Red Guards had been released throughout China, and they'd gone arresting people, killing people. Terrible things were happening throughout the land of China. And there we were, some 12 hours earlier. God had found a company of people who were just willing to intercede along with the Holy Spirit. And it was an amazing experience, something I've never experienced before or since.
That's an amazing story, and I believe one that is repeated, especially in those early days from the conferences and so on. Thank you. And Heather, just having read the book, what particularly struck you about it?
I think it was an amazing reminder of my true beginnings as a Christian. I mean, I had been in an Anglican church. I had kind of given my heart to the Lord, understood the gospel. But there, in those early days in Queen's Road and Devonshire Road, which I used to go to from college, I heard something I'd never heard before, and it was the answer to the struggle in my own life to live the life that I wanted to live for God. And that was this teaching that Gill's already mentioned on the new heart and the new spirit, that God could come and live on the inside of you by his spirit and enable you to live that life. But I think the other thing that really struck me about those days was these men who were totally given to God and loved him with all their hearts. And what emanated from them was the most amazing love of God that just somehow touched our hearts.
Wow, what a testimony and what a challenge to us all. Thank you, John and Heather. Well, Philippa represents a more recent generation, and this stream of fellowships is living and breathing right through until the present time. And so I wonder, Philippa, about your experience of them.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. I first got involved with the fellowships about 20 years ago, in my early 20s, where I went to the conference at Rora, the summer conference. Somebody had invited me and my sister along, and we went along and then went back year after year to the summer conference, and had grown up in evangelical churches, good Christian teaching, but I think at the conferences we were really just impressed with the freedom there and the joy and the love of people there, and we're really we look forward to it every year, and then over the years became more interested in the different fellowships and met with different people, talked to them. I ended up meeting my husband there at the Rora Fellowship, and we did actually end up going to India with the fellowship support and the mission group there, and I actually hadn't been part of a fellowship church during any of that time until the last 2 years, and I must say we've so much enjoyed that, and then reading the book and talking to the generation who first experienced those things has been really precious. I think reading the book for me has really just shown me how God moved in that generation and did something really, really special and fresh in a lot of different people's lives at the same time. And there was a great hunger for God and to see him in reality, and to see him just changing lives genuinely.
And have you, in this last couple of years, have you been at last involved in one of these fellowships?
Yes, so the last 2 years, we've been at the Longcroft
Mm.
Fellowship with our children. So it's been a real delight to be part of that.
Great, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
And thank you everybody for your contributions.